Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, and tonight, my review, my track-by-track analysis of Black Sabbath and the very first album I ever bought by them, War Pigs. I mean, Paranoid. I mean, something. We'll get to that bit of confusion in a minute, but first, I just want to say thanks to all of our viewers who have shared our videos, and for all of you brand new subscribers. The channel is fastly approaching its first 1,000 subscribers. Can you even imagine that? We have grown so fast. A big thank you to all of you. Of course, I've already said it many times. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, but you've been thinking about it, it's so easy. Just hit that subscribe to the tribe button, hit that top bell notification, and you'll be notified of all my future videos. But let's get back to this wonderful album. Now, I'd like to take you back to 1972. I was 17 years old. I was living in North Carolina, and I had just recently heard a local band practicing in their basement. They had played this piece I had never heard before. I thought it was one of their songs. I thought it was fantastic. Then they told me, no, that's Halo of Flies by Alice Cooper. I was sold. Now, you gotta understand, Waynesville, North Carolina, especially back in the early 70s, small town, right? And you bought your records at the local drugstore. And so, armed with just enough money to buy myself 3 albums, I went to that drugstore and I bought 3 albums. My number 1 choice, Killer by Alice Cooper. Number 2, Harvest by Neil Young. And then my 3rd album I picked that day, Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Now, you know, it's interesting with Black Sabbath because I actually owned a Black Sabbath album before I ever owned a Led Zeppelin album. Now, you know, that's a very interesting thing that happened there. You see, if you've seen any of my videos on Led Zeppelin, you know that my first Led Zeppelin album that I actually went out and bought, I mean, I had heard tons of Led Zeppelin. It was played at every party from beginning to end. Whatever album was chosen, I was quite familiar with their material, but I hadn't made the jump yet. Remember, I was originally a Beatle fan. But about 9 months before I would buy the magnificent Houses of the Holy, I bought Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Now, you've got to understand, 17 years old, right? I didn't need a Bob Dylan to preach to me. I needed someone who would just spill it out, say what's on your mind, and let's go from there. But in the end, basically, it was Black Sabbath's Paranoid that was my very first super hard rock album. Now, this is the 2nd album by Black Sabbath, their first album being Black Sabbath, and it was in June of 1970 that they returned to the studio to record a 2nd album. They had pressure to get it out because there had been a certain amount of success with their first release. A mere 4 months later, this album was released in the UK, and later, early in 1971, in the United States. The album did well in England on the strength of its single, Paranoid, and even though in the United States the album virtually received no airplay whatsoever, no love shown from the radio stations for Black Sabbath at this point, the album still managed to achieve the number 12 position in the Billboard Hot 100 album list on word of mouth alone. Now, one thing that you can say about Black Sabbath is that they truly have a unified sound. Now, it's not that they wouldn't do their experimental pieces on each album, and those were some of the most charming parts of what they would have to offer with each and every new release. But you know, I think it's the way they went about writing their material. All 4 members of the band being part of that writing process. You know, it's interesting. It would be Iommi who would come up with the riffs, right? He was the riff master. And then Ozzy would come in and set a melody around those set of riffs with Geezer Butler, their bass player, providing most of the lyrics for Black Sabbath. Now, as a songwriter, I can tell you, this is a very unusual approach to writing songs, and certainly an unusual approach to consistently do from album to album. I was used to Lennon and McCartney teaming up, either helping each other quite a bit with each other's songs or actually writing them together. Or, like in the case of Led Zeppelin, I was used to Jimmy Page coming up with riffs and then Robert Plant supplying melody and lyrics. But here we had a lead singer that supplied melody only, for the most part, and the bass player supplying the lyrics. That was a bit out of left field as far as a songwriting approach, and it intrigued me. And with this more or less unified approach from the band as a total unit, they truly did develop a sound that was unto themselves. All right, so as I brought up before, the album's original title was actually War Pigs, and that makes sense by the album artwork, right? But you know, it was the record executives who thought they heard a possible single with the track Paranoid, and so they put a kibosh on this album being called War Pigs. And that pretty much shows you what kind of authority the band had at this point, because the album artwork was already done and it was too late to change it. I always thought that the album is what maybe a police officer would look like to a paranoid person. That's the way I took it, and I had no trouble with the album cover at the time whatsoever. So of course that leads us to the album's first track, the album's original title, War Pigs. Now this song was originally titled Wall Purges. Now if I've got that mispronounced, somebody out there correct me, but basically the basic setting of this song originally was based on almost satanic Christmas ritual type of thing, but with Geezer Butler identifying the true new Satanists, our politicians, our bankers, war profiteers, all. Here we have generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Wonderful lyrics. This wasn't a pro-occult song, just like most of Black Sabbath's occult-based songs weren't pro-occult. Usually, Satan was identified as the culprit, right? If anything, this song cast an extremely bright and heavenly light down upon all of those who would push the poor class and the middle class to fight their wars for them. A wonderfully powerful song and a wonderful way to start off this magnificent album. All right, so that leads us to track 2, the song and in England, the single, number 4 on the UK chart list, Paranoid. Now it's interesting, years later, Geezer Butler actually admitted to the fact that he wrote the song at a time that he really wasn't aware of the difference of paranoia and that of depression. What he was truly writing about in this song was actually depression. Depression being something that could lead to paranoia, but you have to use your imagination a bit for the lyrics to make sense with the title of the song. But you know, when I think of just how different this song must have sounded on the radio at the time in England, that only goes to show you that the band was exploring a sound that had not quite been reached by other bands, and that they were quite willing to explore that sound further. You know, this whole song only took the band about 25 minutes to write. They just got in there, got it done. They needed some more material for the album, and so based on Tony Iommi's licks, the song was written in a very quick fashion, a single that offered a different sound you had never quite heard before. All right, so that leads us to track 3. Now, track 3 is a song that Black Sabbath wasn't sure that they should even put on this album. And of course, I'm talking about the magnificent Planet Caravan. Now, Tony Iommi admitted years later that he had some doubts about this piece. It's not that he didn't like it, but it was so different from anything they had done before. And you know what? I am so glad that the band chose to include this. This approach, at least once or twice an album, became quite an identifier on future Black Sabbath albums, and us Black Sabbath fans, we came to expect at least one or two songs or musical pieces put together in this rather unorthodox fashion. It further identified Black Sabbath and gave them a status that if they had not embraced this portion of their writing, I don't think they would have been half as successful as they were. Geezer Butler said that they really liked the track. They loved the feel of it. And by the way, what about the magnificent percussion on this song? You know, you've heard me talk about thinking symphonically. Here is one of those rare occasions where the drums actually supplies the symphonic feel to this entire wonderful piece of music. Now, Geezer later said the lyrics were almost as if you were sailing through our solar system, and that everything was almost a cosmic journey. And I got that on first listen, but I gotta tell you, there are too many earthly references in this song. No, what I got was that this was someone in the desert, in an actual caravan, but was looking to the heavens and would be elevated in his mind and see the wonders of the universe. I know. Reading into it again, Michael. Enough is enough. But you know what? That's what I got out of this song. Either way, at 17, I had never heard anything quite like this before. You know, this is my personal favorite track on this album. All right, so that leads us to track 4, one of the most famous and iconic songs of rock and roll, Iron Man. All right, so when I first heard this song, I was a little confused. First of all, I was an old Marvel's comic fan from way back, and so my first assumption, this is about Iron Man, Tony Stark. But then the more I read the lyrics, I kind of wondered if this was maybe a robot. I couldn't figure it out. I was already a fan of Isaac Asimov's robot series, especially anything to do with the Foundation series specifically. It would be years later that I found out that basically what Geezer Butler did here was write an entire science fiction novel within the framework of this song. The song was basically about a man who travels to the future. He sees the apocalypse. He tries to travel back in time to warn the masses. A magnetic field in the process turns him into iron. He tries to warn them. They laugh and deride him. In anger, he then causes the very apocalypse that he was trying to prevent. Next up, the excellent Electric Funeral. Here we see even more apocalyptic images, possibilities that we, humanity, may have to face soon if we didn't rethink ourselves on a global level. All right, that leads us to the 6th song on the album, Hand of Doom, and one of my very personal favorite songs on this album. You know, just the recording, just the sound of this song is wonderful. A really nice lesson in sound dynamics, starting off soft, yet ominous. The warnings come. When the situation reaches a crisis, the entire band reaches that crisis in sound and depth and power. With Ozzy's bone-chilling vocals on top of this sound, this is one of the finest tracks that Black Sabbath would ever create. All right, that leads us to the second to the last track on the album, the curiously entitled Rat Salad. There's a couple of things happening here. First of all, it's a fine drum solo, but you know, there's also times when this song slips into almost sounding like a spy thriller soundtrack, right? And then the first time the drummers take center stage, some of the instruments almost become a shadow. They're drawn down into the mix, even distorted a bit so that the full stereo spectrum is the drums. But as soon as you're used to that, it's right back to full blast Black Sabbath at their very best. A wonderful track. All right, so that leads us to the final track, Jack the Stripper / Fairies Wear Boots. I love this track. You know, when I first heard this track, I had no idea what this song was about, but I could tell you, Fairies Wear Boots, man. You gotta believe me. You know, it was years later I found out that the song was based on an altercation that Ozzy had with some skinheads. No, I know what this song's really all about. It's about a guy returning from a bar one night and looks into a window and sees a real fairy dancing with a dwarf, and the fairy's wearing boots, of course. But you know, no matter how you interpret this song, it is a wonderful piece of music. And by the way, Ozzy provides the lyrics on this one. This album has been voted on many lists as the #1 heavy metal album of all time. All right, so that does it for the video tonight. I want to thank all of my viewers. Thank you so much for watching my video. And if you care to share it, please feel free to. You know, any new subscribers are usually mentioned right here in front of me. Those names are all brand new subscribers, and it's just my way of saying thank you for joining the tribe. You know, it's real easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, hit that top bell notification, and you will be notified of all of my future videos. All right, so that about covers it for tonight. I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line, and I'll see you in my next video.